Well, hello and welcome back to Roundtable Mindset. This is Jamie.
And I'm Mahlon.
And we're here for our first non-introduction episode of Roundtable Mindset this season.
A revamp. Season 3 coming at you live right now.
Right. A little bit of a revamp. Of course, we probably totally previewed that just an episode ago. So we won't go into that again. But here's your revamp.
Goodness. Jamie, how's it going? How are you doing?
It's good. It's good. Crazy busy week at work as always, but it's good. So
yeah,
hopefully this next week will slow down just a titch. I just need it a little bit slower.
Yeah, so the summer has kind of done its thing for me and our family. We're going 100 million miles an hour in 3 different directions. I have a new job that I went to, so that's changed for me. I think this summer was the summer of change. There's a lot of new stuff that took place for us. My daughter is doing online schooling, so she kind of kept going with the university and she didn't even take a break. And then football seasons, for my older son, never stopped. For my younger son, just getting started. So it's kind of like one of those things.
Yes.
Which is kind of fun.
Good. Yeah, it's good. It's good. I love that there aren't a lot of crazy updates for me, because that means that life is just a little bit different. So it's kind of cool being able to sit back and watch my kids do all those things as adults. You know what I'm saying? So
I'm getting there. I still have 2 kids under the belt, but the one, yes, I can start seeing that now. Before I was like, how does that work? And now I'm starting to see it.
Yes.
Which kind of, loosely, very mildly, has nothing to do with what I was just saying, but trying to bridge the gap.
Way to transition.
Yeah, the transition is wide open. No, but one of the things that I've been thinking about for a while, and I know we've talked about this, all these wonderful topics that we're going to be discussing. Today's topic is around anger and a lot of different faces of anger. And, there's been some incidents even over the summer and with changes happening within kids and activities, and life used to be one way and now it's something different. Anger has seemed to kind of pop up in more and more places, I would say, in my life and throughout different relationships at different times. And it's kind of interesting that anger would be the thing that keeps coming up over and over, because a lot of times, and this is what sounds weird, Jamie, and I can't wait to kind of crack this walnut open, is I'm not really mad, more than, I don't even want to say hurt. It's how I'm coping with some of these changes that are happening, which is surprising to me, right? Like, anger seems to be one of the ones, and I naturally drift into the anger when I go into my emotional spectrum, just because it's easier for me than the other emotions. And I think we've talked about that before. But it made me start thinking about anger a little bit differently. And so this episode today that we're talking about, we are bringing back a guest that we had from last season who has really become one of my favorite people to talk to. And you told me she would be. Not that I didn't trust you, but I didn't realize how much she would become one of my favorite people.
Well, that's you should just trust, because I know, I can tell you, I'm helpful that way.
Yeah, it's never like you've led me down the straight and narrow before.
Oh, no. You never followed me that way. You always tried to pull me out as I'm like sprinting into the face of danger or trouble. Let's be real.
Okay, so maybe that's why I'm a little hesitant to be like, yeah, she's great, Jamie, I believe you. No, I'm just kidding.
That was a long time ago. It was like 5th grade. I don't know.
No. So yeah, just to kind of stop teasing a little bit. So today we have Dr. Krista with us again. If you remember, Dr. Krista joined us last season when we had that really in-depth conversation around narcissists, and we went through, we talked with, I can't think of their names right now. The 2 Stephs from introspective AF are becoming human AF. That's what it was. And then we went into having some specific conversation on things that happened in my life with a family member, and Dr. Krista came on and kind of helped us walk through that, and really did bring a I would say a spotlight into some of these dark corners that, even though I experienced firsthand, nobody's ever really taken the time to kind of talk me through what some of that is and what does that mean and how I'm going to use the words or air quotes normal that was. And so I just really appreciate Krista coming on and having that conversation with us. And so we wanted to bring her back again today so she could talk to us through anger. So welcome back, Krista.
Well, thank you for having me again, and I'm very excited to broach this topic, as well as just excited that mental health is being discussed in whatever format, and how anger impacts us is a important part of that. So thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if sorry, Jay, I'm just going to jump right in here because I have some stuff that I want to just start like
Go for
unveiling.
it. I know you're like chomping at the bit.
Well, because again, Krista, surprise, this is all about me again. I just want free sessions from you, so we bring you on as a podcast. No, I'm kidding. But no, all kidding aside, like there's my emotional. I want to start at the very beginning and say from my emotional spectrum because I believe everybody has one. I'm speaking like I know how all of this works. I don't. I'm just trying to put my words to it. So I'm hoping if it needs to be cleaned up, Jamie and you can maybe help me with that. But for me, my emotional spectrum, it is comfortable for me to use things like humor to disarm a lot of different situations. I call myself an inappropriate smiler or laugher because sometimes I'll be in a really serious or intense situation and I would maybe start giggling or I'll crack a joke. I just need to do something because the emotions that I'm feeling are not comfortable for me. So I'm trying to push the situation and push myself into an emotion that I can relate to better or I can navigate better to say it that way. The other side of it, which is also concerning for me and something that I've been looking at for a while, is my other emotion that I go to is anger. And anger is also another one that I can navigate those feelings pretty well. I feel like I can compartmentalize anger, when it's the right amount, I should use it, when I shouldn't use it. So those are the two kind of emotions that I run in most of the time. And I try to put myself and the situations into one of those two categories. And like I was mentioning kind of in our intro here, over the summer, there was some incidents that have happened where I found myself being in the anger space, and it made me want to stop and kind of open that up a little bit to say, why is anger, or I guess to say it differently, why do people use anger like that? And then to start understanding, are there different faces of anger or different phases of anger? I don't know which one would be better, but to give you one little context, and then I'll maybe be quiet to see what you have to say, is there were situations where I would be reflecting as, I'm being angry in the situation, but I wasn't really angry about it. I was more frustrated or I was more surprised by it or irritated, but anger was the one that came out. And Jamie, I think you said this once before, which I kind of jotted down, or if it was you, Krista, please forgive me, but I thought it was Jamie, where anger is a secondary emotion. And I never had thought about that before. And so I've been thinking through that and I can't find a way to disprove it because that's what I like to try to do. I try to disprove things that I hear to see, if I can break it
Every
apart.
anything I say, we're gonna work on. No, I'm just teasing, but
Yeah, I like to challenge. So I threw a lot there at the table. I'm just going to kind of sit back now and not say anything, but that's kind of where this all kind of started from.
I think that is a lot of things to kind of unpack, but I think that the foundation I'd like to set up is that anger can look in several ways. It can be presented and shown in many ways. The emotion itself is a healthy, natural, normal, quote unquote, uh, response, emotion that people experience. When anger becomes problematic, truly is when it's used in either of those extremes as kind of like all or never situations where a person uses it. It's the go-to emotion for someone and just avoids other emotions. And anger is just easier. Oh, or it's what's comfortable, or it's what they know, what they're familiar with, or that they use about any strategy to avoid anger. And in those situations, obviously, then there's some characteristics that can become very unhelpful with that in terms of behaviors. The other main foundation theme I think that will present itself oftentimes through our discussion is that anger is an emotion. Oftentimes people confuse anger with behaviors. And so the notion that it's okay to be angry and it's healthy and it's a normal expression and experience, how we express our anger is what tends to get people in trouble. Along with, so the behavior is the problem, typically if we're talking about anger problems or need for anger management, etc. But there is that twinge of a problem if we use anger all the time or never allow ourselves to experience it. The notion of anger as a secondary emotion, there are, again, it depends on who you ask, even in a professional realm, but anger as a secondary emotion is often indicated in that people will feel what you described, say disappointment or frustration, and anger can be kind of like an umbrella. It shields many of the other emotions. So it's like one of the pictures that I kind of present when I'm working with people or I think of anger is maybe it's a secondary emotion in that it's used to shield all the other emotions. So it's like, here's anger, then there's an umbrella, and we have all the other emotions that might be affiliated or covered up with anger. And that can even be opposite emotions like excitement. A person may use anger to even cover up excitement for a variety of different hypothetical reasons. But anger becomes secondary to what a person is really feeling.
It's funny because I feel like just as Mahlon was talking a little bit, I feel like anger is like more accessible for me. You know what I mean? Like, so when those other feelings are there, anger's an easy one to grab onto. It's like, and I can't decide if it's because it's like ruts in a road. You know what I mean? Like that's just an easy place to fall into.
Right.
Um, but I have met people, I know someone very close to me that I think anger was not an acceptable emotion when they were young. And so for her to get too angry, I don't know that I've literally ever seen it. And we're very close. Lots and lots of places that I have seen her rub, in those spaces where I would be very angry. And the responses are not, they're not typical in a space where angry would be normal. You know what I mean? Normal. I guess I'm using air quotes. I hate normal, but you know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, and I'm kind of all over the board here because there's so much that you guys have already said that's like, yeah, but what about this? What about this? The one thing that I'm going to land on, which I think touches what you're saying, Jamie, is that we did an episode a while back where we talk about toxic masculinity, right? And it's a lot of times what I hear from people and what I've experienced is if you use anger, you could almost be labeled of having one of those toxic personality types or traits or whatever it is. And I do think there's a stigma, even growing up, like anger is one of those emotions that you were not encouraged to really explore, right? Like, and I think as a person, I don't want to be angry for a long time because being angry for a long time is also toxic to what I believe to your soul, your spirit, your mental health, all of it. But I do think if we're talking the form of healthy versus unhealthy, just as much as I don't want to live in anger, I wonder if avoiding anger is also as equally unhealthy. And I think that might be some sort of when, I was growing up too, I was told to deal with my stuff. I was told to kind of pick up by my bootstraps and move on or find a solution. Like anger was kind of a way of indicating there's a problem, but don't stay there, fix it. And I feel like there's a more healthy exploration of anger as an emotion rather than, and even though I can't disagree with you, um, the anger is a secondary emotion. And I like how you were saying that, Krista, that it's an umbrella for other emotions. I still feel like there's really not a lot of focus on how do you, from a healthy mindset, really engage and start using anger appropriately. Because I do think there's some situations and things happening in our life where it warrants to use anger appropriately, but that's not really talked about. At least in my world, I haven't seen that.
Again, pretty complicated. A couple of things. As we're talking about anger, I would love for the audience and yourselves to also consider that many of the negatively balanced emotions, things that we don't like to experience, like anger, fear, perhaps hatred is a very strong word, whether it falls in the feelings category or not. But those feelings that we just don't like as individuals, or that we're not exposed to, or that culturally or in our environments are either modeled as or we're taught that they're bad. Um, some of the things that we talk about may definitely apply to those other negatively balanced emotions. So those other negative or less preferred emotions societally, culturally, individually. So maybe that can have a broader stroke than in this discussion in terms of it being related to anger, but also possibly some of those other emotions. I think it's really important to recognize that there are many factors that impact the anger piece. And so if a person, for example, I would say many of them are environmentally related. So culturally, one of the things that you said, Alan, is that people growing up are exposed and taught how to deal with anger. That was your life experience. Others may have been like, that's all you can feel. That any other, don't cry. I don't care if you're disappointed. You can be pissed, whatever. The emotions of anger were reinforced and the desired emotions. So it really depends on many environmental factors. Could we say we have disposition or personality characteristics or even genetic components that lead us more towards or away from anger? There's research that says that personality has some genetic components to it, but equally the environment does. And perhaps with some of these kinds of abilities to experience and express emotions, environmental factors play perhaps a broader role in it because we really do see what's modeled. That said, we could possibly say that individuals who are exposed to anger and see it all the time and see how it's helpful and unhelpful, 50% of those individuals that grow up in that home might reject the anger as an okay emotion and be like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be like that. That was horrible, blah, blah. The others just by nature, so to speak, follow and they become similar in the way that they respond to and experience the anger. Does that make sense? And unfortunately, that's kind of what we deal with when we're talking about psychology and we're talking about individual differences. But I think environment does play a major role as we look at, say, anger and what we adopt and how we recognize it. The other quick thing is that definitely either extreme of anger is the go-to consistently, virtually always, and it's the anger umbrella or the umbrella emotion or avoidance of it. Either extreme, both can create significant relational problems and difficulties in work environment, personal environment, social environments, etc.
Yeah, those are really good points. And for myself, when I go through my lived experience, right? Like I go back and I paint the world the way that Mahlon grew up, and everybody else has to be the exact same way, right? And that's how I kind of go against, to use Jamie's terminology, what's normal and what's not normal is a lens against myself. And there's a variety and an array. So I'm glad you brought that up. It also touches on area in the emotions arena where I find it very annoying and irritating is what, and Jamie and we've talked about this before. I live in the world of black and white with my profession. I love things that it's either yes or it's no. And the gray area that I'm learning to live in, if I can clean that up and make it more black and white, I would love it. That's why this emotional spectrum and the, mental health field and all of that is really hard for me, is because I don't like the answer, it depends. And I have to learn that in a lot of places, that is the only answer that exists, is it depends. And even when I heard what you just said, the undertone of that was, well, it depends. It depends on a lot of how you were raised and if it was in your environment or if there's a genetic code. And so, yeah, I think that's a good level set for the rest of our conversation. I might speak in a way that is referenced back to how I was raised and how I see the world. But I also recognize, to your point, that's not everybody, and everybody's going to go a different path or have a different reaction to different emotions. So, again, thanks for kind of clarifying that, because again, it's all about Mahlon. You're just living in my world.
Oh, that's fun. No, it's interesting because what you're talking about reminds me of there was a parenting class that I took, where one of the activities was to, like, in the circle, you put all the emotions that you feel very good at practicing or that you feel like you understand well, or that were acceptable in your home when you were growing up. And then outside of that circle were all these emotions that you weren't as comfortable with. And in doing that activity, anger was on the list, obviously, and that one was like, "Oh, no, got it." And I started thinking, gosh, is that because, everyone in my house was angry? I do think it was an easily accessible emotion when I was growing up. And then as I really was doing some personal growth, um, discovered that my anger typically came from anxiety. When I was worried about something, when I was worried about safety, if I wasn't feeling like I was meeting the expectation or I wasn't good enough, it actually led to, like, an anxiety depression diagnosis. Um, and I didn't even know that was there until that happened. And so it was helpful for me to be able to figure out, okay, this isn't because I literally thought I needed anger management classes or something because it was like every tiny thing, every tiny irritant just made me fly off the handle. But when I was able to really tear that apart and look at it, it wasn't every tiny thing. It was, if my kid runs down the hallway and knocks the picture off of the wall, the glass is going to shatter and it's going to hurt him. Like these kind of thought processes that happen so fast, I didn't even know it was happening. So I feel like you are hitting the nail on the head where, yeah, it can be absolutely environmental or it can be something, that was something that's just in my brain. Um, and and I have found things that help me cope through that to deal with it, and then was able to shift my parenting so that my kids didn't grow up with that being their story, that was mom was just mad all the time because I definitely didn't wanna do that to them either. So it's interesting that what you're saying is exactly, kind of the process that I went through in discovering that.
Well, so then I have a question for both of you then. The anger that is easily identified, I think I can get out of that space really quickly, right? Like there's times when I know something is making me angry. Those situations I can understand, I can navigate. But what about what advice would you give people to say, how do you identify where the anger is coming from if it's not relatively available in the front of your mind? Like, or anger shows up because you're doing one activity and something happens and you just are instantly, that emotion just overtakes you. And really when you cool down and you think about it, you're like, that was really stupid. Why was I so mad? Or why was I so angry over that? And you know, that I think is something that would be very useful to kind of maybe start thinking through, because I've even fell into that trap where I was like, okay, I know that I blew up, I'm making this up, but my kid didn't put all of their toys away. And then I'm like running, around the house and I'm upset and I'm yelling at everybody, and then everything's a big deal, and it's about the table wasn't wiped down and the rooms are still messy and your toys are all over the place and blah blah. And it's really not, it wasn't the fact that my child left toys out for the 15th hundredth time. It was just the straw that broke the camel's back. But if you can't ever understand where that's coming from, it's hard to navigate. At least that's my experience. So what do either one of you have to say about how do you really start analyzing and finding out where the root of this anger is coming from?
Well, I'm gonna kick that over to our expert because I think, 'cause I think it depends, Malin.
Yeah, now that's going to be the answer of the week.
Yeah, at least for the next hour and a half or so. Um, a couple things. I think you're very insightful, and the descriptions that you're having and sharing, Malin, are right on target. And I love that you have done the work to recognize and develop an emotional IQ to be even able to introspect and say the things that you're saying. I mean, for a person to be able to reflect on that, I think that's moving towards growth and health, and continue to ask those questions and to recognize where you're at is super, super helpful. And I'm I'm not just trying to suck up or anything. I just think that is so important for people to hear, that that's another lesson of this discussion, is just being open to reflecting. And that's really kind of the answer to your question too. It's this reflection. It's spending time and intentional space and energy to reflect. Like you said, like it was a mountain. There's the notion of it's a straw that broke the camel's back. I liken it to also a glass of water. If your cup is already half full, it's going to take much less water for you to overflow. And so you're already there. So when you start feeling your anger barometer, your thermostat, say you're it's the little things and the repeated little things that are going to send you off the edge. You start becoming more aware of that. So you start recognizing that's the third thing that's really kind of just ticked me off today. And you stop and you reflect and you ask yourself literally, what is really going on with me? And I mean, that's not easy. And it's not always that simple, but that's really one of the key things you can do to move towards what you're wanting to know. What is the underlying issue? But if you become in tune to yourself and you pause and you intentionally say, what's really going on with me? Then you're more likely to get to that end. But it's really those little things. Like I know when I introspect, I can handle big things. I can handle big things. And then later I reflect and I'm going, what the heck? How did I fill in the blank, right? But that repeated stuff that a kid would do, sometimes it was legitimately, I don't like those little things and those things that add up. But sometimes it really was something else. And that was then whatever that little thing is becomes the straw that broke the camel's back, like to use your terms. But it's also sometimes just that. So I think also recognizing there's not always a bigger, deeper thing. Sometimes you're someone who just gets really tired of people not listening, tired of repeating yourself. And so don't rule that out as an option. And then if you have a sense that you're getting overly angry or that it's blown out of proportion, then that's, I think, a time, or before you get to that point, stepping back and saying, what's really going on with me here? And the other question, I think, is also, is this really anger? What is my true emotion here? Am I feeling out of control? Am I feeling disappointed? Am I feeling uncomfortable that X, Y, and Z keeps happening and I have no ability to manage it, which is obviously a sense of a loss of control. So two things, I think, bottom line is what is my real emotion? What's really going on, asking yourself, and then also catching yourself early and reflecting on, is there something bigger going on since I'm having these reactions to these small things?
Yeah, that's pretty, it's pretty hits the nail on the head, because I do think, like, for me personally, in dealing with some of that, it was all about taking time to think about what happened and why the response. And now I know that if I get irritable and things push my buttons fast, it's usually because I'm not setting good boundaries. It's usually because there's something else for me going on. And another thing that's helped me a ton too is perspective taking. Because often that anger for me comes out of a place of hurt, like someone was trying to do me wrong or something. And if I can just stop and try and look at it from another perspective and understand that the world doesn't really revolve around me and it's not like everyone's not out to get me, that helps me a ton too. But, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jamie, but I just wanted to kind of add this before we move on. You said reflection, Krista, and I will say, I've had conversations. Jamie, you and I have had conversations for years, and I think I'm a pretty reflective person, but I don't like to spend a lot of time in there just because it's really. It took me a while to get to this point. I just didn't like it because I'm like, oh, it's all these emotion things, and it's like, okay, I'm older than 14. I need to figure out my words, like use my
Stinking
big,
feelings.
yeah, like my big boy words. So really what it is it gets down to I don't want to be vulnerable like that. I don't want to have vulnerability exposed because I'm a very I don't want to say stoic person, but I'm a very private person, and I like to have my outward appearance to say that everything is in order. And if it's not in order, I don't need to air my dirty laundry, using air quotes. So I really try to stay in the space of everything's fine. I'll deal with it privately. And so reflection kind of had that tone to me. It was like, oh, let's sit down and everyone, let's talk about what's wrong with Mahlon, and here's that vulnerability coming up. And it's like, okay, I don't want to do that. And I have to say this just because I do have a connection with what I'm about to say. So I want that to be, I want the intention of what I'm about to say to be heard and not my tie to it. So I want to make sure everybody knows that I have a tie to this app that I'm about to say. I'm not going to name it by name, but reflection was one of the things that I wanted to spend some time in. And so I didn't know how to do it, right? Like, I'm like, okay, do I just sit in a room by myself and think about my thoughts? Well, that seems kind of weird. And so people have brought up, and I think Jamie's even brought up like journaling before. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a journaler. No. And like, I just kind of poo pooed it, right? Well, I recently got involved with actually helping build an app, and I'm helping with testing it, that actually talks about and helps you journal. And so I started doing that a little bit more in the effort of, it was just for testing, right? Like, I'm doing this not because I need to do reflection or I need to do journaling. That's kind of stupid. I'm helping with this app just to test it. And then I realized it's one of the main ways that I can sit down and start reflecting on some of the answers that I give, right? Like, if I say, what's wrong with me today, or what's going on with me today, or how do I feel today? It's really that time of reflection. So I started understanding that this is a way for that reflection to take place. So I'm being really long winded, but what I'm trying to bring together is that I didn't know for the longest time how to sit there and reflect, other than doing these foo-foo ways, I'm using air quotes, that I didn't really want to do because I felt like it was a little too much in that emotional space. And I'm finding that that journaling that I'm doing, it really is me kind of talking back to myself. And it's in a different form that I can kind of hear it, if that makes sense. Like, me just being in a room with myself, just thinking to myself, it wasn't going to be the Rosetta Stones that unlocked it for me. And I still think I have a long way to go in this field or this area, but it was a beginning point that I've noticed even in the last couple, I'd say weeks, maybe the last 2 months. I've really started understanding and growing in that area. And so when you said reflection, I just wanted to call that out because I don't know if anybody that's listening to this will relate to how I felt. Like, okay, reflection's good, but how do you do it? This was just one area that I kind of went into under the guise of a different benefit, but really I'm getting the benefit of having some of that reflection. And I'm sure there's more. So I guess my open-ended question, after either one of you guys want to respond to what I said, is, what are some other things you can do to have some of that reflection?
Well, I don't know, Krista, I don't know how much work you do in Early Head Start, or how familiar you are with that program. But one of the things that I loved about Early Head Start is how intentional they were about teaching children, not necessarily ABCs and things like that. But they started every day with a how's everyone doing, greeting one another, how is the weather, some of those normal things. And then they taught the kids to plan. What are you going to do first? What are you going to do next? What are you going to do after that? And so then they would let the kids go to the different centers and do the things. And then they would bring them back and have them recall what they did, and then they would end their day and they would plan for the next day loosely, right? But this idea, it was interesting after my kids went to Head Start and I started this kind of process for myself. It was like, wait a minute, those are things that I should have did I learn those things when I was a kid, and why didn't I continue practicing those things? Because that really was like, what did you do in the dress up center today? And what did you dress up as? And who did you play with? And, some of those things, just to take some time at the end of the day. Um, that's kind of been an intentional piece. I think I did it before that, but it's been more intentional since working in Early Head Start and learning that was an intentional piece of their day, that they were teaching kids those social emotional skills to make a plan, recall, review, reflect, those kind of things. So that's yeah, that's what I do anyway.
I appreciate that information and the some of the things that I'm going to suggest also kind of are in the the area of like structure, creating some sort of a structure or a plan. I love that you talked about that. I literally just written a note, mainly when you started talking about vulnerability. So I reflect on that just for a second. Basically, there's a protection, like, especially when you think of like the anger as as the umbrella, we can use anger as a protection. And you just diagnosed it. You just shared it. You sometimes use anger to resist or to not feel vulnerable. Very often, that is fairly frequent. So I love it that you said it before I even had a chance to go there, because it is a big piece of that anger umbrella. Oftentimes, again, a lot of factors fall into play with there too. But so there's a lot of things. So it kind of depends. In terms of reflection, it can look in a variety of ways. I have for years been doing research on reflective journaling in my classes, and it can be reflective journaling on a topic in their chapter for preparing for an exam or future learning, or just making something more applicable to make it more, to increase learning and their memory of the information. But sometimes it's just about journaling about their life events. Sometimes it's about choosing a cognitive distortion or an emotion, and they journal about that. So journaling is huge, and of course, it's kind of a hot topic and really kind of cool to do gratitude journaling right now, and research supports it. So definitely, gratitude journaling is a huge way to also structure possibly that intentional reflection. Because if you find a way that you just want to appreciate people, which I get a sense that both of you tend to do that at times, and it gets you outside of yourself. So if you start reflecting on gratitude, sometimes that it does help to calm the anger if there's legitimate if there's a need for it to be calm, but it doesn't necessarily address the true source of it. So it kind of depends. But when we can focus on others, it helps us sometimes to lead to some self-introspection. So that's one of the more complex ones. So like specific types of journaling. There also are apps out there. A lot of those are like mindfulness or breathing apps. And so breathing is a way that we can sometimes just take a time and have a kind of a canned or a typical thing that we think when we breathe in, like, what am I really feeling? Am I managing my feelings well? Whatever. But through some breathing, and you create, what is that self-talk you need to be able to reflect? So that those both obviously are creating some structure around it. This is a kind of complex one, but I think it is very cool when you think about reflection. And you can do reflection kind of the way Jamie described it in preschool terms of, like, you kind of plan your day and then you go do it and you revisit and you go back and you re-look at it, right? But we have a lot of research on visualization and how that helps sports performance. It helps us to calm. It can help a lot of different increasing performance on a lot of different skills, right? We can also use, I call it pre-play visualizations. So we're entering into a new situation and we know that there might be a lot of anger. We know there might be strong emotions. We can put ourselves in that space through visualization or pre-playing, and you have X number of hypotheticals that you put yourself into to prepare for those potential scenarios of whatever situation you're going into. And by doing that, you are preparing yourself, developing skills to be able to reflect, because you are creating structure, but you're also pre-planning how you're going to act and react. And in doing that intentionally, you're reflecting really on, how do I typically respond in a situation? If A happens, how am I going to respond? Oh yeah, that's what I usually do. I want it to be different. B, what is plan B? And based upon the different scenarios that you're going to receive in the external world, as you're thinking about a potential situation, you can look and reflect in that, and that can create some structure. But then also afterward, after events occur, prime opportunity to step back and say, whenever these difficult situations, or whenever I interact with so-and-so, I'm going to take time to figure out three buckets. Maybe you could do that, a specific strategy to reflect. Like, these are the things I was really comfortable with. These were the things I was uncomfortable with. These are the things I want to emulate in the future. And so you can structure it that way. But it's very intentional. I like the pre-play thing because so much introspection and reflection happens before the event ever happens. And you can de-escalate and you can respond in a very healthy way beforehand. So it's kind of an intervention, but it's also a way to reflect and gain more and more awareness for our reflection. Prayer, sometimes reflection can present itself in a form of prayer, whether that's talking to a higher power or God or whatever. And maybe it's just an ongoing discussion. And that can be a point of reflection and becoming tuned into your inner dialogue. Oh, really? You just told yourself that you're an idiot? That's really helpful. That kind of a self-talk and being aware of your inner dialogue and then kind of arguing with it so you can be reflecting on what's helpful and unhelpful.
Challenge that, right?
Exactly. And then obviously talking to friends, having safe spaces such as that, videoing ourselves. Like you touched upon developing skills to journal, and it's super helpful. I don't like to write very much. I don't like to read. So what I've done, and I don't do it frequently, but sometimes my reflection is bringing out the video camera, doing a selfie while I'm discussing whatever the situation is. Oftentimes it's when those emotions are really strong and high, because I want to be able to then go back, look at it and see, where was the irrational fear? Where was the undue anger? Where did I escalate things? Where was it drama? Where was I not using emotional regulation? Where was those kinds of things? So I like the video because then I can go back and I can be going, you look like an idiot. Or I can also say, and this is kind of mushy soft, Mahlon, so prepare yourself. I can also say, you know what? You needed that and it's going to be okay. You're a valuable person. It's okay to not like to be vulnerable. It's okay to be where you are at. And it's okay to not be embarrassed, even within yourself or whatever the scenario may be. I was obviously projecting a little of my own stuff into that, but I've really found the video recording of self creates a great space to do reflection.
That's a fantastic idea. Also,
I wouldn't have thought of the
rather
video
vulnerable.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
me either.
we've talked about trying to become more of a video podcast, and I think the word vulnerability was at the very beginning because like everybody sees you, and I think that's the whole point of being, the vulnerability for me. And sorry, Jamie, I just realized I cut you off. I'll just be quick. I'm sorry.
You're good.
It's that whole being seen. Like I can be the different, I would say the different layers of being seen, right? Like I can be seen in the way that I want people to see me and I'm comfortable. I can see myself in a way that I'm comfortable of me seeing myself and I'm fine. But at any moment, if somebody or even myself starts seeing me in a different light or seeing me in a different, or I'll say a deeper way than what I want them to see, all of a sudden, all sorts of bells and whistles start going off in my head. That's like, no. And even just the word video says, okay, now there's other elements I have to be mindful of. Automatically, that makes my vulnerability, I'll call it my vulnerability meter, start going off the charts because now I can't, okay, here's the word that you brought up. I can't control all of the dynamics of how people perceive me because I've now opened it up for them to start having those perceptions on their own because now I give them another visual cue. So it's just interesting after hearing you talk and having this conversation, how all those things are connecting. But it remember that conversation we've had, Jamie, where we need to be a video podcast. And we start talking about immediately like all the things we would have to change and what we'd have to do. Yeah, exactly.
Even my background, this is probably the first thing that I'm like, because that's the most controllable. I can control my background, right? Hey everyone, surprise! We are going to turn this into a 2-part episode. So we are so grateful you've joined us. We hope you've gotten a lot out of it, and we hope you join us for the other half of the conversation. We'll see you again in a couple weeks. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.